things first, you already win. You already him, you don't gotta pretend. Fuck them, you already king. You stay real, you confident in your skin. It's all now, sit in the power that you already in. This the story of a master from a true Bedouin, far away from home than few ever been. First round pick, league of the smooth gentleman. The game rigged like 50 said, it's a cruel sentiment. I'm from the era when lyrics and bars is over everything. 5-star veteran. You couldn't walk in my fucking shoes or carry them. Excuse my borderline is very thin. Married to the game like ever since maybe 2010. I realized most of y'all not serious. Point blank period. I flex and twist necks like cherry stems. Thought he was buried, but there he is, a new narrative. I keep winning.
They not used to what you bringing, kid.
I keep winning.
They don't even know what they looking at.
I keep winning.
Man, yo, pick one lane and stay in that
I keep
shit.
winning.
You came up on that hood shit.
I
my
keep
nigga, you
winning.
know, nobody seeing your vision for real.
I keep
man.
winning.
Even your friends don't fuck with you.
I keep
man.
winning.
Be ready for your turn.
So here's your one shot right now. Your heart pound.
Thanks for being here. What's
Throat
good?
right
This
when
is
you
how
pipe down. It's kind of like time froze on ice now. Damn, stomach tight.
30 Eastern time, and we have another great show. We have a really good guest, someone that I connected with on social media, and I've really, their content is really, I think, valuable and important and creative. And I want to talk about what they're doing and how they see the world. So let's do that. Let me bring them on. Dr. Aisha Augusta. Hold on, guest chat. Boom.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm glad you're here. Thanks so much, yo.
Of course.
Yeah, so I have you for about an hour, and we've been trying to get this going. I'm glad we're on. Your content on social media is how I found you. So we're gonna cover a bunch of things, but let's just kind of jump into sort of the Instagram stuff. Your handle is psychological justice.
Yes.
And your content is right at this like interesting intersection of trauma and identity, psychology, culture. Justice implies like ethics. So there's a lot. It's really interesting. And so tell me what you're thinking. What does psychological justice mean to you?
Yeah. So yeah, my handle on Instagram and on TikTok is psychological justice, and I specialize in racial trauma and helping people heal from oppression. And primarily, I focus on helping Black people, African Americans, heal from the racial trauma that they experience. So psychological justice, like the title, was birthed when I was in grad school and I was studying counseling psychology. And I've always been an activist, if you will. In the 8th grade, I was like a Black Panther for Halloween. Like that's how ingrained, it's been in me. And so I've always been just a huge advocate for justice. And then when I started studying psychology and being a Black woman myself and understanding the experience of Black people in America, the title, psychological justice, how can we get justice psychologically, through many of the elders who have came before, many of the Black liberation leaders from the 60s, the 50s, and so forth, always preface the importance of liberating your mind first. And so that's the psychological faculties. So when I thought about, those who are working on the front lines to make sure that every individual has the rights and is treated in a just manner, it made me think about, psychologically, how can we seek out justice through our psychological faculties? And so when I started doing some digging into trauma, and as I'm learning about it, through my experience, it became very, very clear, and research backs this up, that Black people experience the most pervasive trauma, known to man. As I was learning about all the different types of trauma in school, there wasn't any attention focused on the unique experience of Black people, especially in America. New York Times did a study a few years ago, and they found that on average, Black people experience 5 instances of discrimination every single day. And so that can be, the small microaggressions that you get here and there about your hair, or, larger, bigger instances of discrimination. But what research also finds is that it doesn't matter, how big or how severe someone thinks the discrimination is. Discrimination in and of itself is traumatic. And so kind of that's where that emphasis came from, essentially a gap in the helping field, if you will, the mental health field of, oh my God, there's a trauma that happens more than any other trauma that I'm aware of. And we're not specializing in it. We're not studying it. And it happens to so many people every single day, up to 5 times a day, is on that high end. And so just bred from just sheer passion, the way I was raised, that's kind of how psychological justice came about. So I wanted to use my platform in a way to bring awareness to racial trauma. When I was in grad school, as I mentioned before, like that term wasn't even a term that was coined yet.
Right.
Racial trauma, that wasn't even a thing. So I want to bring awareness to it, but also to help people heal from something that is so pervasive. When we think about all the other types of trauma, and I'm not going to name some, I don't want to re-traumatize people, but you can imagine all the different types of trauma that there exists in the world. There's always an emphasis on the healing part, including, it has to include that individual getting away from that thing that is traumatizing them. When we think about the Black experience, there's never an opportunity for us to escape, that type of racial trauma. If it happens 5 times a day, it can happen at the grocery store, when you're driving in traffic, getting stopped by the police, trying to enroll in college. I mean, it literally spans the gambit of our experience. So there isn't that opportunity for us to get away from it. So how do we heal from something that's pervasive? How do we heal from something that is all encompassing, in certain instances? So I wanted to shed some light on that. And what I found in my research and through my own journey of healing myself is that there needs to be a beckoning towards indigenous and cultural practices. When we think about the pervasiveness of racial trauma for Black people, it is ingrained in every system throughout the nation and throughout many systems throughout the world. So we cannot go to those same systems that have traumatized us seeking healing, right? That's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
So we need to look outside of those systems. We need to look outside of those structures. And that means we need to go back to a time and a culture and the systems prior to the influence of colonialism. And so that takes us back to our indigenous practices.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I know that was a lot. I said
That's a lot, but it's also good. One of the things you talk about a lot is the holistic nature of what we're trying to point to, And
Yeah.
I think one of the things I find interesting is that you are engaged in not just an education kind of thing. You're pointing to phenomena in our experience, and I find that this is an arena where there's not a lot of language, and so those of us who are trying to point at these places, we're sometimes inventing language. We have to create, we have to involve in education about the word. So even down to the definition of the word trauma, right? Trauma.
Yes.
Traditionally, I'm taught trauma is some sort of a blunt trauma or PTSD, some sort of violent trauma. But my understanding, and I hear it in your definition as well, my understanding of trauma is it ranges from those more aggressive things that we know down to, I kind of frame it as like almost the nicks and bruises of being taught how to be, or told how to be, or told what the ideal is, and then having to deal with that ideal in contrast to your own experience, in contrast to your own definitions. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I think that's true. I think a big part of healing yourself is doing that examination that you're talking about, is really looking into the words, the way that we're defining certain things. And is there a gap? So you're absolutely right. So who came up with the definition of trauma? Surely it wasn't someone thinking about the experience of Black Americans, right? Like, so, because that was never even included, right? But it happens so often. So much of American history is embedded in the traumatization of mass amounts of group of people, right? That's written into the foundation and the history of our country. So yeah, so looking at that, that's a part of that psychological justice, right? What have I been taught about the world and how I view it that may be even traumatic to me in the way that I look at, my worldview or the way that I view myself.
Yes.
And so that's that psychological justice component, right? Re-examining what we've been taught, how we learn things, how we take in information, the definitions that we utilize. Is that perpetuating my trauma, or is that bringing me to a place of healing?
Beautifully put, for real. I think that's well said. I think for me, I want to talk about the healing journey, right? And for me, I
Mm-hmm.
think like the foundation for the conversation around this is, you touched on it, right? Like there is a thing that is the world. There is a thing that is me, but that I have an identity. I have a story about these things that is not exactly the thing. And we all have a story about the thing that is not exactly the thing. And the question is my story empowering me and helping me find joy and happiness and freedom and helping me like do everything that I wish? Or does that story trap me in something less than that? And so, you know, acknowledging that difference between what is and the story I hold. And then like, so what is the healing journey to you?
Mm-hmm. I love that question. And help me if I forget to answer the second part. But
Okay.
the stories that we are being told, I love that, because we're always playing a story, right? We're always playing this narrative in our minds of who are we, how do we fit into the world, what is the perception of the world, about us. And when I think about racial trauma, God, so much of that narrative is wrapped up into, this group of people who our history begins at when we were enslaved. And then we go through all of these statistics that further degrade our self-worth and our self-value, right? All of our standardized tests tell us that we score lower, which
Mm-hmm.
is like not true. All those tests are measuring is just educational, access. But that's a part of the narrative, right? It's a part of the
Yes.
narrative of the health disparities, within the African American community. I hear so much about that. All of my texts, all of my books are all about the health disparities. Oh, and make sure you know that Black people have higher rates of X, Y, and Z. And are we the only ones that get sick? Like,
Right.
my goodness, no. But like that's that narrative that there's
Yeah.
something wrong with us, right? And when you think about the foundation of information, that's what it was. That's what it was built on. In the 1700s, where the founders of the different sectors of science and what later became psychology and all of that, they had to create this narrative that this group of people that they enslaved,
Mm-hmm.
and brought over here to the New World deserve the treatment that they are getting. And so they had to build science, right? They had to build medicine on that same premise, because the cognitive dissonance that they needed to bring a resolution to was that, we are a Christian people, we're a Christian nation, we are good people.
Right.
And good people don't do bad things, right? But
Correct.
good people do, enslave a group of people who should be enslaved, right? So that's the narrative that they needed to tell to themselves.
Correct.
And so that same narrative, is built in again to the fabric of so many systems that we interact with. And so that's that narrative that we tell ourselves, whether we are consciously aware of that or not. So the healing journey begins with understanding who you truly are. So an interesting statistic is that discrimination, research says that discrimination of any kind, again, reduces our self-esteem, our self-worth, and our self-value. Right. So when we're thinking about the history and the foundations that were laid, for hundreds of years ago, and then we think about this component that we experience so often is also designed to reduce our self-worth, right? To negatively impact that narrative. So the healing journey should directly address that narrative. We have to have an accurate narrative. We find out now that the scientists who determined that race was all about the bumps on your skull. Like we know, back then you could get your PhD by writing a 7-page dissertation, going to school for 3 weeks or something like that. Like these people were not smart, you know what I'm saying? But this is what all of the knowledge that was like the foundation for all of our different sciences rather was built upon. We have to go back and we have to find the truth within these falsehoods, and that changes the narrative. And what was the second part? The second part was
the nature of the healing journey, or what it means to you, or because that's a whole other conversation. Like what it.
So the healing journey for me, and the reason why I started doing the work and started focusing in on racial trauma was because I had to heal myself. I was in grad school, and the first 2 years I was studying nothing but transgenerational trauma. It's the concept that trauma is passed down from one generation to the next. The scientific term is epigenetics, and we know that to be true now.
Yes.
That you can pass trauma down. Very, very, it's very, very known. So we know that to be true. So that's what my research was on for the first couple of years. But being a Black woman, and this is when I was in grad school in 2016. I mean, like Michael Brown had just got murdered. I mean, there was so many Eric Garner. I mean, all throughout like that time, there was so much racial trauma happening, and it was hard for me to be a Black woman and exist in the world and study trauma while I'm experiencing it. And I had to take a break from researching it just so that I can exist. And I realized like I have to heal myself. And so I started out with the psychological part. I started out with who the world has told me I was. Versus who I actually am. And I had to do some research and some digging to find that out. And I had to rid myself from the psychological mindset of the false notion of white supremacy that is embedded in all of our minds. So I had to first eliminate that from my life, and then figure out, who am I? Who am I outside of the oppression that I experience? Who am I outside of how the world views the Black woman? And so that was kind of the beginning of my healing journey. And it took me a couple years to do this, like 2 or 3 years of really intense working on myself and developing a pathway forward that involves, holistically deconstructing my identity and reconstructing that in truth and in historical facts.
Right.
So that was kind of so the healing journey to me is a very, very personal thing.
Yes.
Racial trauma in and of itself, discrimination in and of itself is a rejection of some form of your identity. And so that injury is at the soul level. And so you have to go to the soul in order to heal.
Right.
And so, a lot of times people have never met their soul. They've never truly met themselves. And so the healing journey is a very personal journey. It is a very deep journey where you face yourself, where you face a lot of the misconcepts that you have believed to be true about who you are and about people who look like you. And it is hard to do. I talk about, when I work with people, I talk about, one stage of the journey of healing yourself is that you have to confront the internal oppressor, right? And oh my God, most people don't even know that they have an internal oppressor. Mm-hmm. But these systems don't work just based on the external, systems within, the education system, the religious sector, the financial sector. They work and operate because people who work in those sectors believe these things to be true. And so they behave in a certain way. So, and you do as well. And you have to confront that part of yourself.
That's super key. You said so many things. I took several notes here, and I got to find a way to come back to all of these things. But I love that you, internal oppressor is a great one. I love that you gave us a glimpse about sort of your own personal experience there, because I think that that's key too. I think a key part of people gaining the courage to face their internal oppressor and to go through what is a very challenging process, the healing journey, something that I'm still on, and I've been going through for a while. So let me get a little bit with me for a second. I think that for me, my healing journey has been not just as a black person, but also as a man and also as Billy. So what I mean by that, I've experienced racial trauma. I've experienced masculine trauma. I've had a sense of myself around what it means to be a man, and I've had to confront that. And with that comes a lot of like, there's a little bit of shame around some of the ideas that I held and the ways I showed up and the things I let happen around me, you know? But even deeper, like going even deeper, like confronting Billy, myself, the son of Clemire, right? Like the way I look at it is let's go personal. With my mom, I'm the eldest son, and I was very much the like her confidant, and I was kind of like, I was my brother. I have two brothers, younger brothers, but I was also like their uncle, father, kind of, you know, I played that role. So it was very early on a caretaker and all of these things. And I've taken that with me into my adulthood. And it's only in my late 30s that I've come to this ability to relax some of this and become a freer version of myself where I'm not trying to fix problems and give advice and preempt X, Y, and Z. This was a big part of my psyche. I felt like I needed to save my family. We grew up in the hood in Brooklyn, and I had a underlying sense that my job is to make money to save my family. And I didn't know that. I was just operating like that. And it was the journey changes everything. The story changes the whole ability to approach what is, you know? That's kind of an open-ended, I don't know if I asked you a question there, but I just wanted to like to agree with you heavy on that. And
How did you do that, Billy?
how did I do that? Which part are we talking about?
How did you change your perspective from realizing you didn't have to be the caretaker to how did you get to a place where you can relax a bit in your identity?
I'm gonna tell you what, it's been a process of noticing. First off, it was like a political stuff earlier on in my, like as a younger, let's say in my like late 20s. But the big changes happened recently as a married man. I'm married to an awesome, beautiful, like love of my life, Sheba, who and I think relationships, good relationships give you this opportunity for the mirror. But
Yes.
you know, some of the things in the patterns, like in my late 30s, I would still be on the phone with my mom and my brothers who lived in Brooklyn together, and I'd be sort of refereeing arguments over a Zoom call. Little things that they were handling in the home. So my wife, and this was normal to me. I didn't see it as a problem. It was like what I was supposed to be doing. And Sheba introduced the idea that something is kind of that that it wasn't healthy, or that this didn't need to be my role, or maybe that I was enabling something through constantly playing this, you know? So she challenged me in an interesting way that produced something different. And that was a big part of, I think, a larger journey.
Nice. That's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there's that. The other thing I wanted to touch on, you talked about like just the slave stuff. I did a post, I did a reel on Instagram about Dr. Samuel Cartwright. This one of the most famous, he was a medical doctor, and he was also a slave advocate and a journalist in the 1850s, and he wrote hundreds of articles, and he set the ideological framework, the medical framework that said that white people are supposed to, like, it's their duty to help these black people who otherwise would have nothing. They don't know what to do with their lives. We're giving them purpose by creating them as slaves. And he created words like drapetomania, which was a medical condition that he said black people had. Those black people who ran away from their slave servitude duty.
Oh, yes, that was a mental condition. That's right. If you keep running away, yeah,
So
something's wrong with
it's that deep, you know?
you. Yeah. So can you imagine just the notion of, or the idea of liberation being looked upon as a pathological thing? I mean, it's so
Exactly.
when you think about, trauma being passed down, ideologies are also passed down. So you wanting to liberate yourself is seen as a sickness.
Exactly.
Isn't that something?
And as with like looking at it through the journalism lens, to see what he did and how he published these papers, and the magazine that he published was widely read. It was huge. It was like the Fox News of that time, like very popular. He was rich. He was a rich celebrity type figure, because what he did was he went to the marketplace, and the marketplace of ideas in journalism, and he offered landed white men the narrative that they needed. Is exactly what you said earlier. The narrative they needed, the medical justification, that, and so he would be rewarded handsomely for like codifying a framework of thinking where black people, where everything they were doing was a-okay.
Yeah, yeah. It's also by design, because they needed the poor white community to feel like they were superior than someone. Because if they didn't have that, then they would realize, the injustice between the rich and the Victorian era of Europe versus the peasant class.
Correct.
And so that's a documented thing as well. So the white superiority was needed in order to unify all of the groups of people who later on became white, right? They needed to bring the Polish, the Germans, the Italians. They needed to lump all of them together and to say, hey, we the rich white people are not your enemy.
That's right.
No, it's these, it's this class or it's this group of people who you are far more superior than.
Exactly.
And that helped unify, their whole race. And I had a coworker once whose family is Italian, and I asked him, I said, hey, when did you guys become white? And he had no idea what I was talking about, because Italians used to be treated horrible.
Yeah.
Because if you look at like old images of those in oh God, blanking on the city. They had curly hair in Italy. You know what I'm saying? Like, they were a little bit darker, had some curly hair. Like, they did not look like white people today.
Yeah.
And so I always like to ask, white people, especially if they know where their family's from, like, when did you guys become white? Because y'all was fighting for a long time. Like, like, nobody was calling y'all. There wasn't this group, there wasn't this like combined kind of identity.
Yeah.
But that was done by design as well. So
exactly. And it's all stories, right?
It's all narratives, isn't it?
And
it's because narratives are so powerful.
They are
narratives
super
are so powerful. Yes. So powerful.
And to me, that gives me an opening. That gives me like some hope, right? Because we're not talking about this like insurmountable, crazy external world. We're talking about the stories that exist in our heads. That means that we have access to something entirely different. And all it takes is a flip of the switch, as on an individual level, but writ large, as we tell what I would call better stories, more holistic, stories that don't include these divisions.
Right. And like in therapy, there's a modality called narrative therapy, and it works with individuals by creating a new narrative for themselves, for their experience, whether it be trauma or whatnot. But it is such a powerful tool because that we live within a world within a world, right? So our inner world is is the first world that we wake up to, right? As soon as we wake up, our thoughts are going, right? Messages are being sent to us or talked, or our internal dialogue begins as soon as we wake up, right? So we're constantly telling ourselves things about ourselves and about the world. So that's where the first change needs to take place, is internally. But that's hard to do if you don't recognize the ways in which your subconscious has been manipulated, essentially.
Yeah. And this is the real thing. It's the internal oppressor that you talk about. It's funny that the internal oppressor doesn't sound like the internal oppressor, or the person hearing it most often might not call it that. Like, it's beneficial to know that you're talking, or that voice you're hearing isn't necessarily your friend, or it's not giving you food that nurtures you.
Yeah.
You could mistake that and live your life by that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
quick example I have is a friend who, an acquaintance, someone I know who from like high school who we got into an argument. We were on social media, and I had to point out that he uses his social media to like really talk shit about black women, and to talk shit about the queers, and to talk shit about you know Mexicans and things like this. And yet there's so much deprivation in the world. There's so many white men doing terrible things. There's so many like political statements one could make. And I noticed that he uses so much of his time pointing the finger at those groups that I mentioned. And
Yeah.
one day his response to me was like, "Listen, bro, I'm just a black man in America." And when he said that, it was like, oh no. It was like, wow, there's a story he has about himself, about America, about his power. And so where he puts his time and who he wants to chastise, he wants women to cover up he wants black women to dress better. He wants black women to respect their vaginas and don't have sex. He doesn't think he has the power to apply that and tell a white man to do anything, or to make a critique about capitalism or about anything. And so that's not where he puts his time. And so this was a powerful sort of manifestation of that, I think.
Yeah. Dang, I mean, oh my God, that's a whole nother like topic on, whew. I mean, I don't know if you want to go there, but like that's a whole nother topic on
Where do you want to go, son?
black men and whew, I don't know. I
It
was
hit
gonna
me
talk
like
about,
that.
huh?
It hit me like that. I'm telling you, I was like, what? You know?
Yeah, it's a whole that's a whole nother thing. I mean, it's feeding into that same kind of notion of, in order for you to feel good about yourself, at least you're not these groups of people, right? That's an age old kind of tactic used to control people. And so, yes, I'm not surprised that that's a part of what we see within Black masculinity. The thing too is, and this is why I preface so much on going all the way back. This is for me. I had to go all the way back to African history prior to any European influence. Because when we think about, and especially for Black men, when we think about masculinity, we're thinking about the definition that our oppressors gave us,
Mm-hmm.
right? They wrote the book on that,
Mm-hmm.
on how masculinity is expressed now. But what is true masculinity? Like, and where do you get that from? Like, where would you go to get a pure definition of masculinity in the way that your ancestors saw it before the influence of colonialism? Like, you have to go back pretty far.
Yeah.
But that's important to do, because otherwise you're walking around behaving in a way that's not even natural to you. That's not even natural to you. And so when I talk about, and when I help people heal, when they're going through my workshops or when we're having our one-on-one sessions, it is so important to really find a pure definition of who you are. Who did your ancestors say that you were and that they were, prior to the influence of any other group of people? And this is so important because that is the foundation that you need to start your story, right? That's the narrative or that's the foundation for the narrative that you'll be building for yourself. And I think that's really important. Otherwise, we're just, doing what we taught. We're just building and growing that oppressive, that internal oppressor, right? And it oppresses everybody. It oppresses the LGBTQ. It oppresses women. It's an oppressor. It's going to oppress people.
And even men and even white people, right? I think even these people,
Yes.
I can speak to the men example here. Like, if you are too attached to this thing, you don't allow yourself to be who you are. You don't take a moment to notice that. You are so busy imposing a standard on yourself and hating yourself perhaps for not measuring up to this and that. And then you're also imposing that on everyone else you meet as you look out into the world. And the more you can find forgiveness for yourself, and forgiveness, it means like acceptance for the self in your fullness, then you can accept. You have space for accepting others.
Absolutely. And I think like recognizing like our connection to humanity is so important. And I think as indigenous people, Black people, that's where like our healing really thrives when we recognize that, the reason why we are so, you know, energized to fight for justice or to advocate for other groups of people is because we are the ones who helped kind of spread humanity across the world, from the beginning. When I think about the Moors and their role in running Europe for 800 years or so, I mean, they were there teaching humanity. Hey, don't do this, change your clothes, throughout the seasons. Use this to sterilize your hands and your utensils, like all of that. Like this is how we live separate from animals, and all of those things like that was brought throughout the world. And that essence is humanity, right? So that's why, when you see your friend talking down upon these groups of people, like that rubs up against you, because your natural reaction to things is one of the connection to everything else, right? You can see yourself connected to nature. You can see yourself and your connection to all the creatures that are created. And so that should rub you the wrong way. That should rub anyone the wrong way. So when you're thinking about healing, also, it's like recognizing your connection to humanity. And then how should you behave now, as a result of that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the history component you've mentioned is really key too. Understanding that there's not just one way to be. There's not one narrative that is correct. That there are multiple ways of going at this, and that our ancestors have a different, viable, totally legitimate, flourishing narrative that is something we can access. The other thing is oneness. Can we talk about oneness, which is
I love that. Sorry.
um, oneness to me, it's what you said. It has to do with our connectedness, but it brings us back to everything's connected. Not just but time. Everything is right now. There's only now, and to not be too caught up in past traumas or future traumas, some sort of hope that something's going to change or you're going to be in some other place, that this is what you have, and your job is to be as present and as grateful, from that, words like gratitude come later, but like to be present and accepting and loving what is.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I love that. Like when you look at all the different spiritual practices, um, I can say for sure, but I may be wrong, but I think like all of the religions as well, like once you get to a certain level, there has to be a recognition of this oneness. When you look at Buddhism, right, the highest form of enlightenment is a recognizing that we are all one. When I look at science, and I love that science is just now catching up to something indigenous sciences have known for centuries. But when a physicist says that, atoms don't actually touch, but they're like magnetically or something drawn together, so closely knit, um, and they call that force that is pulling everything together, they call it dark matter because they don't really know what it is, but it's something that holds everything together in the cosmos. Well, that's spiritual people would say, well, that's the all, that's the source, that's God. That's why in the Bible and in most religious texts it says God is in everything. That's that essence or that source that creates life. And you can see it in the scientific level. It is holding everything together. And so when we recognize that we are also a part of that, like we are connected to that, then I mean that can help reduce so much of this division that we feel that we need to hold so tightly because of our ego.
Yeah.
But as you grow spiritually, as you heal, and I think spiritual growth is synonymous, and that's a parallel kind of process to healing,
Yes.
right? It is so important for us to heal these wounds so that we can progress spiritually. But when we recognize that, like that we are all connected in in this cosmic experience of living, I think that reduces a lot of strife. It's supposed to. It's designed to do that naturally.
I think
So the oneness is really important. Like it is
super.
so important, but it's hard for people to understand. And again, because they haven't done the work on themselves yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find
I want to
go ahead. Yeah.
I know you may have other questions, but I wanted to talk about joy too, and like the importance of that and beauty and all of those like really feel good things on your
Yeah.
healing journey.
I love that. I love that because I've got that written down. I was going to talk
Okay.
about the fact that you post not just like really thought-provoking questions and like reels that introduce language and you help us like sort of intellectualize certain things, but you also post yourself. You post yourself enjoying yourself. You post yourself roller skating, which is something I'm terrible at that. I like to think of myself. I'm an athlete, but but roller skating is one thing. I just hit the floor all fucking night. It's terrible, yo.
Would you play basketball? I see you got a
Football and basketball.
football. Okay, cool. Yeah. I'm a former athlete too, so that's why I asked.
Okay.
But no, yes. I think that is the reward that you get when you heal yourself. And I think it's so important. Like once we get to a place of becoming familiar with who we are, right? When we meet our soul, if you will, and we're healing ourselves, right? We're facing those parts of ourselves that for the majority of our lives, we would much rather have avoided, have left, over there under the rug in the closet. When we start to face those parts, when we start to heal those parts, when we start to give love to those parts of ourselves, that small child who was hurt within us, who's still there, waiting for us to, to turn around and give our attention to it. When we heal, we project out into the world the most beautiful aspect of ourselves that we possibly can, because we are portraying essentially the authenticity of who we are, right? It's not muddied anymore. It's not cloaked or covered, with all of the traumas of the world or with the lies of the world. So beauty and joy is so important and is so crucial to the healing journey, and that's essentially the reward for truly seeing who you are, acknowledging who you are, and integrating all those parts of yourself into wholeness essentially. And when we do that, we reflect back to the world like a beauty that isn't necessarily there when we're not living our healed lives.
Right.
I always say like your authentic version of you shows the world how beautiful God is, right? If God is good and God created all of us, then we should see that reflection and that beauty of God in you, right? But the sins of the world, and I'm not trying to get religious, but like the sins of the world, meaning like, all of the horrible things that we see on the news that happen can really taint that. But if you can get to a place of shutting all of that out and being present with who you are and fully doing that work, I mean, my God, then you like washing off this beautiful gift that God created. And then you could present that to the world and it should be glistening, right? Exactly. It should be glistening. If you're made in the image of God and if you truly understand that, like, or believe that God created everything, God doesn't create anything that's ugly. All you have to do is give your soul the attention that it needs. And then you'll reflect the beauty of God back.
Yeah.
So, that is so important. And joy in and of itself is an act of liberation. I remember this is when I had to face my internal oppressor. I remember like going to restaurants and it'd be like a group of Black people sitting down, enjoying themselves. And they would be, just laughing and just having a good time. And my internal oppressor would be like, oh my God, they are acting so ghetto, this and that. And then later on, I was like, why can't they express themselves in their culture? Like, I don't know no African tribe that is meek and quiet. Like, we are expressive people. You know what I'm saying? Like, we are truly expressive people. And that was a part of me, like having to name and call out that internal oppressor. But the joy that we naturally exude actually heals us. it actually heals us, right? Like when we laugh, we release certain endorphins in our brain that helps us feel calm, that helps us feel good, that helps
Exactly.
comfort us. So joy has to be a part of it. And it's not like the fake joy, it's not a joy in materialism. It's truly a joy that we naturally are supposed to experience when we're being present in the moment, right? When we're
Correct.
being present with ourselves. Because so many times we avoid ourselves, right? We go out to the clubs, we drink, or we do whatever. Or we, get wrapped up in our
Do our thing.
relationships, or
Yeah.
wrapped up in work, or even in sports as a distraction from ourselves. When we first need to be present with who we are, we need to be present with the pains of our soul. We need to be present with the pains of our past. We need to give those areas attention. And
Yes.
then from that, just a natural beauty will exude. And from that, joy will come forth. And that's important. That needs to be a part of the healing journey
Has to
as
be
well.
a part of the healing journey. And I think I've been trying to understand some of this, that internal oppressor you talked about in terms of the black experience and how we view ourselves. I think that, I was, as someone who identified as an activist kind of early on as well, like I
Hmm.
think a lot of our imagery from the civil rights era, which again, storytelling, right? A story about what it means to be a politically astute black person, what it means to be an active black person. It's what? It's not joy, it's struggle. That's the word we
Yeah,
identify with. And
you're right.
and and I am not just the only black man who has a chain tattoo on his arm, Um
Mm-hmm.
and that just made sense to me. Of all the things, my first tattoo is this chain because I identified with struggle. And you start to identify struggle, you start to question ease. You start to question it. If you're at two at ease, I certainly had this. If things are going too well, I'm ready for something for the shoe to drop. I'm also
Yeah.
like, I had to work through this with my therapist actually. Like, even be like, I'm good at things. I'm creative. Um, I had trouble saying that. I'm also like, I had trouble with even thinking about myself as a full person because I wanted to present a more serious thing. So even let's say
Mm.
as a single man dating and having success with women, let's say, I didn't want to present that. I didn't want to talk about that. It felt boastful. It felt wrong. And my therapist really had me rethink the stories I had where my expression of who I am, of the things I'm good at, of my successes, I'm tamping that down frequently and
Mm.
preventing my fullest expression.
Mm.
So that's been something to unpack. That's another thing I had to unpack. And from that, I got
Yeah.
to what's been great is it's been twofold for me. One has been a hopeful one where I look and I go, Dad, I'm actually good at these things. Let me try it. So I just tried. The other thing has been looking at I have a critique of the journalism space, and I think there are some really terrible people who make a lot of money in journalism. And using that too, like, oh, other people aren't afraid to use their voice. Other people aren't afraid to voice their opinions, even the unpopular ones. They're willing
Right.
to advocate all kinds of terrible things for. And I'm second guessing and thinking three times over, making sure I'm saying the right words, making sure I'm presenting myself in the appropriate way. I want to be freer than that. And so I really started to actively
Mhm.
like try to engage that. And that's been life changing.
Absolutely. How long have you been doing that? That's a great.
You talking about that last part about like being,
Yeah,
I'd say like a year,
expressing that. A
frankly,
year.
a year, a little bit more than a year, maybe.
Yeah. That is so cool, Billy. I talk a lot about, and sometimes I get pushback about like how religion and just society as a whole, like they emphasize the concept of being humble and humility as such a noble trait to have. And sure, I think it has its place, but I think for the Black experience, it's really grossly overdone. We already have discrimination that reduces our self-esteem, self-worth, and self-value, and then we have this other layer of a noble trait of further reducing our own importance.
Yes.
So yes, it is hard for us to say the things that we are good at.
Yes.
It's hard for us to talk about our strengths or even to bring them into the room confidently.
Yes.
I was talking to someone recently and they were like, why you have to boast about yourself or something like that. We were joking, and I was like, well, why do you want me to have low self-esteem? Like, like, why does that make you feel comfortable, right? And I will, yes,
That's
if
a
you know me,
great,
like I will laugh and boast about myself like in a joking way
yeah,
because like it's further healing. But yeah, but why does that make people feel uncomfortable, right? We have to
yes,
talk about the fact that we live in a low self-esteem society, like and like everybody is expected to have this type of level of esteem, a very very low level, and so yeah, like
break
we're
that,
we're not even, huh?
break that shit, yo. Do your thing.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. When I think about like again, this is why we have to go out of this system. When I think about like African culture, like even the rites of passages for certain groups of people in the Yoruba culture, when males and females come of age, 14 or 13, they do, their rites of passage when they're being introduced into womanhood or manhood. And they do this traditional dance where they've all practiced this dance, but when they present themselves to the community, they're all dancing. One of them is trying to be the best dancer, and there's a title for that. And that's not anything that's like looked upon as being um, too self-absorbed. No, that's just a part of our culture. That's why when we play sports, like we trash talk. We like, no, you are trash. Like you can't whoop me. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Like you cannot. You're not on my level.
yeah.
Like that's just a part of our culture, and we've had to really numb that part of ourselves to fit into a society that feels less than, essentially, by our own essence, by our own presence. And so we've reduced ourselves dramatically.
By
So
our
it's
own
good to
story.
hear that. Yeah, it's good to hear that you are railing against that. I hope more people do that. I am
Yeah,
as well. So
yeah. I wish you the best. Keep doing your thing. Keep being, proud and brilliant and all of it, and giving serving the looks and also the, the intelligence. But like,
thank
I
you.
think I think truly, like, even the way we, like, again, the way we look at people that we respect historically, like black historical figures, Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
This is a pre-internet era. All the images we have of him, the letters from the Selma jail, like, they have to do with his persistent, like, struggle, his fear for his life, this goal of some, his life seemed to have been a nonstop, like, persistence against white oppression. But he also lived. He also had a
Yeah.
beautiful wife. He also had a family. Also lived. Okay, and I think the stories, even down to, I think the white press, even the good white press in the 50s that wanted to help the black struggle, their goal was to elevate stories of suffering, was to show the image of that man standing with a dog attacking on him and people hit with water. They needed the white America to see the violent treatment. And so that's just been elevated and it's been locked in as what blackness means. And I think we have this amazing privilege in the moment with our lives, with our voices, with these technologies that our parents didn't have, to not just like push back against oppressive systems, but to live and to express joy and to show that it exists and to demonstrate it,
Yeah.
embody joy.
Yes, yes. I always joke about like we get our routine slavery movie that comes out every couple of
Yup.
years. That same narrative, right, that they want to push. And that's done by design. And you're absolutely right. Like the images that we see are of suffering. But yeah, where are the images of joy, and that in and of itself? And I think we're seeing that more,
Big
now,
time.
of just black people just, I mean, there's all kinds of hashtags of just black men frolicking. I love watching those. Or
That's
just
good
black
stuff.
joy in and of itself, because and what is that? Like that is a kind of a righteous kind of indignation that I will exist. I will live free. I will
Yeah.
live free to enjoy myself. I will live free to do whatever it is that brings me joy. And I think that is underlooked when we talk about, justice, right? When we
Yeah.
when we talk about justice. And that's why um it's such a big deal when people see Black people enjoying themselves. That's why we have, those memes of like the Karens, calling the police whenever a Black group of people are just having a good time, right? Because we cannot have a good time, because in their mind, they're getting those same messages as well, that our life should be of suffering, our life should be of distress, of striving constantly, right?
Correct.
So our existence, our mere existence, especially when we enjoy ourselves, is an act of rebellion. And joy is definitely
Damn
that.
fucking right. Absolutely. My wife has been leaving several comments. She said, "Go there." This is back from before, actually. I think we were
Oh.
thinking about where to go. But she says also,
Oh.
also at a certain point, the humility is an inauthentic performance we're doing to impress others on how humble and unaware of our power and brilliance we are.
Come on. Yes. Yes. How humble and unaware of our power. That's right. Because
And
you
it's
bet not be
inauthentic,
aware of who you are.
right?
Just like you bet not know how to read, right? You bet
Right.
not have no education. You bet not understand that everything that you've been taught, is inaccurate to a certain extent. So, yes, that is such an important component. I love it when people are railing up against humility and the concept of being humble.
Yeah.
Again, like it has its place, but like that is such some brainwashing type stuff.
I think it definitely has its place. I know for me, a lot of my stuff was reaction to stuff. Like to me, I associated a kind of boastful, like especially the dudes that did well with the ladies, you know what I'm saying? Like there's a kind of boastful kind of like I was like, I don't wanna do that. I don't wanna be that, right? But and maybe you know what I'm talking about. I've been very vague about this, but what I'm trying to say is like I think part of the journey is to notice that okay, so you rejected something and then you swung over here, but that it's a journey and that you can be somewhere, you can find your thing somewhere in the middle. So there is a you rejected something, you called that boastful, you call that being um conceited, but your
Mhm.
expression isn't that word and your intent isn't that word, and how can you continue to like not perform anything but to simply be with confidence. Yeah.
Yes. That's why authenticity is so important. Yeah. So maybe you're not that guy, right, in high school, but who is your authentic self? And do you feel comfortable presenting that? And if your answer is no, then there's a lot of work you have to do. Does that make
Exactly.
sense?
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of work you have to do. And maybe you don't know who your authentic self is. And that's where you start. You get to know
Yeah.
yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How important is early childhood stuff?
Oh my God, it's so important. I talk about my first form of rejection, because when you're healing from racial trauma, understanding that discrimination is a rejection of some part of yourself. And so I always help people go back to that first moment of rejection. And for me, I was 7
Mm.
and I lived in Arizona, and I went to this school where I was the only Black person there. Everyone else was Mexican. And no one would talk to me. I'd be at recess. No one would talk to me. No one would play with me. Like nothing. It was just silence, like radio silence. I'd just be sitting there in the sun, just, looking around. But that was my first moment of rejection, and it was related to discrimination of some form, some rejection of a rejection of my identity. So the early childhood stuff is so crucial. And sometimes we, just run over it or act like, it doesn't have any impact on us. But that 7-year-old little girl is still here, and she is where I need to nurture, is where I need to give my nurturing energy to. She is the one who I need to make sure that she feels accepted when no one else would, when no one else would be with her. So that's really important, and you have to go back. It's a concept called quantum healing, and so I'm bridging kind of spirituality and psychology. But quantum healing means that there is no component of time, right? What you do now, and we utilize this technique sometimes in the helping field, where the empty chair kind of concept, where you can have a client talk to their deceased father, you know, in this empty chair, and you can say the things that you want to say to them or that you wish that you could have said. And in some way, you know, that helps this person move on and heal. That's essentially quantum healing, right? It's irregardless of time. So in the same way, when you're healing from trauma, you can go back to those early memories of rejection and you can speak to that self, that part of yourself, all of the affirmation, all of the care, all of the words of um of encouragement that you wish an adult would have said to you. You can do
Mm-hmm.
that yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those early childhood experiences are still with you, regardless of if you say it's 50 years ago. That's still with you. I've worked with um, 50-year-old veterans who had experienced childhood sexual assault and never talked about it until they was in my office, and 60-year-old individual. I've had 69-year-old, 70-year-old individuals, you know, talking about things that have happened to them when they were 4 and 5. Those things are still there.
Yeah.
That's still a part of you, and especially if you have not dealt with that or faced it or sought out healing for it,
Yeah.
it is definitely still there. So those are incredibly important.
Incredibly important, and that's why I'm so grateful when I see you having success and people like you, and it's like talking and giving language to these arenas, because and doing it in your unique way, because I just keep coming back to language again. I grew up Christian. I grew up going to church in a Christian Baptist church, and for most of my 20s though, I was a hardcore kind of atheist.
Mm,
I really rejected the church, and I started to um, become like, it was all about science to me, and the God wasn't making sense to me because of all the destruction and terrible stuff. It was like a political
mm,
set of observations that then made me reject the broader claims. I have obviously a different sense of it now, but what's interesting to me is, as I'm listening to you, I'm following you, and I understand the power of what you're saying, and I understand the power of even what you said, quantum healing, sitting in the room, and about the narrative formations that happen, and the value in being able to internalize a different story. And I think we're there's such little language. We're delving in this spiritual realm that if it was 10 years ago and I was listening to this conversation, I might struggle to follow. I might struggle
mm,
to internalize what we're saying, Um,
mhm.
and I know that there are people who all the time reject this stuff and think that we're not talking about anything. Like, they're so attached to a more like, materialist scientist sort of approach to what's going on.
Yeah.
So there's so much value in opening the space for us to have like these conversations, to give us the opportunity to be pointing to the same things, and have language that we can all access and agree on about what we're pointing to. So just a
Yeah.
kudos to you. Shout to what you're
Thank
attempting.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that that's the thing with some, you know, religious groups, is that they utilize language to divide, right? You know, and not just Christianity. I mean, a lot of them do that. A lot of political groups, you know, do the same thing. But like, if we recognize that we all are connected, it's back to that kind of that oneness. We all have a shared goal ultimately, you know, to live a good life, to live a life that is enjoyable to us, you know, one where we don't have to struggle. And essentially, the soul of every human being. Like, I will argue, whoever wants to debate me on this concept, but I believe every human soul desperately wants to be free. It just desperately wants to be free, right? Wants to express in however way they want. They want to show their gifts. They want to, you know, experience the full range of what it is to be human, right? The joy, the ups and the downs, the sorrow. I mean, all of that, the grief, the coming together, the finding community, the having family, the growing old, the multiplying themselves by having kids. I mean, all of that, the connecting to the earth. I think wholeheartedly that is the desire of every soul. So if we can go back to that, then we have, you know, that shared essence. right? And then we can create a shared language together, right?
Yes.
Recognizing that at a soul level, like we all want the same thing. Right? So all of these structures that are man-made, may be dividing us, but at a soul level, right? At an eternal level, we all
Talk to
we all
him.
have the same drive. Huh? What'd you
I
say?
said, talk to him, yo. Exactly.
Seriously.
That is the unifying thing, and that's the story that is there. We can access it. The news media focuses us on left and right, and red and blue, Democrat, Republican, black and
Yeah.
white, and all of
Yeah.
these, and Mexican, U.S. But what you say underneath all of that is a truth of our interconnectedness. That is true of nature as well.
Yeah.
It's not just people fighting and scrapping for limited resources, whatever. Like story is a derivative of capitalism. But anyway, I've had you for an hour. I don't want to hold you too long. I do want to, man, I think I've had you for an hour. I really appreciate your time. So I want to like give you like one, is there anything you'd like to say to wrap up? Is there anything you'd like to plug? And then we can wrap.
Yes. So I provide individual racial trauma healing coaching. So if anyone is interested, you can find me on IG at psychological_justice, and there's a link in my bio that will take you to Psychology Today to link up if you're looking for individual work, if you're wanting to unlock and heal from the most pervasive trauma. Please reach out if you're looking to do that. See, another plug. I also work holistically, so helping individuals heal, as well as Black professionals through a non-for-profit called Black Excellence. I also founded SIPO, which is a technology-based organization that provides an inclusive score. So we help organizations fix or work on the environment so that people of color feel more safe, they feel more included in the work environment, and they're able to perform a lot better. So it's on all sides, the individual and the organism, the business and the organization. I'm about to say organism. I'm talking about physics.
All good.
So it's kind of a wraparound kind of care that I provide. So
That's
if you're
great.
interested in that, you can find SEPOW, SEPOW on IG as well. Yep.
Fantastic.
That's all I have to say. Let me see.
Hey.
You have to bring me back because I think, man, we have
only
to talk
scratched
about
it, son.
like masculinity. Like I was so tempted to go there. There's so much to cover.
All right. Well, you already you locked in a second one, so unfortunately, I hope you're ready for that. We'll figure that out.
I will. I'll do my research and come with some good talking points. No, but seriously though, because that's really important. Like, just as though I know we're out of time, but like, just as I think like Black women have to heal and truly understand what femininity is, like I feel the same way for Black men, like really understanding what is masculinity, like taking back that definition that no one gets to give us, but like we find out what that actually is from our indigenous studies and our historical studies. But we need to reclaim those, right? We need to reclaim femininity, and we need to reclaim masculinity, and understanding the essence of that and what does that mean. And they're both beautiful energies that complement each other. And how can we exude that in its purest form, right? Not being tainted by other groups or by oppression or any of that, or misunderstanding femininity as a weapon or misunderstanding masculinity as a weapon. So we need to exude that pure energy. And that is what brings humanity back to the forefront. And that is what heals the whole world, essentially, once we recognize and tap into that. So.
Masculinity, femininity, and love are on the table for the next conversation.
Yes.
Notions of love, and obviously, masculinity and femininity, we embody both of these things, right? Each of us, right?
Yeah.
And it's about the acceptance of that and anyway.
And the balance of that.
Yeah. Don't get us started, okay? Don't get us started.
I know. Look, the yin and yang, right?
It's really
feminine and feminine.
That's key.
Yep.
Well, Sheba says yes. Freedom is the human setting. Yes. Oh my God, so excited for the second ep. And she says reparenting ourselves is our healing work.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. Reparenting. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Reparenting.
Well, good.
Beautiful.
Love it. Love it. Yo, thank you, Dr. Aisha. Have a great night. Thank you for your time, yo,
Thank
and your
you. Thanks for
wisdom.
having me.
All right, we'll
Take
talk soon.
care.
All right,
All
bye-bye.
right. Bye-bye.
Uh-huh. Last things first, you already win. You already him. You don't gotta pretend. Fuck them. You already king. You stay real. You confident in your skin. It's all now. Sit in the power that you already in. This the story of a master from a true Bedouin, far away from home than few ever been. First round pick, league of the smooth gentleman. The game rigged like 50 said it's a cruel sentiment. I'm from the era when lyrics and bars is over everything. 5-star veteran. You couldn't walk in my fucking shoes or carry them. Excuse my borderline is very thin. Married to the game like ever since maybe 2010. I realized most of y'all not serious. Point blank period. I flex and twist necks like cherry stems. Thought he was buried, but there he is, a new narrative. I keep winning.
They not used to what you bringing, kid.
I keep winning.
They don't even know what they looking at.
I
for
keep
real,
winning.
Man, yo, pick one lane and stay in that
I
shit.
keep winning.
You came up on that hood shit.
I
my
keep
nigga, you
winning.
know, nobody seeing your vision for real.
I keep
man.
winning.
Even your friends don't fuck with you.
I keep winning.
Be ready for your turn.
So
though,
here's your
kid.
one shot right now. Your heart pounding. Clear throat right when the crowd pipe down. It's kinda like time froze on ice now. Damn, stomach tight round, flipped upside down. Try to speak, but the words and the thought took flight now. Sweaty, but can't pause, it'll wipe down. You pray for the day you flow with a hype crowd. Now they hanging on your every word and slight sound. Maybe these critics is wrong, maybe you twice as strong. What if every fear and doubt was gone? I'm up first, bright from dawn, like fuck it with yawn. I squeeze life, pythons bite when the mic's on. Peace, I might respawn. I hook left with the right arm, living it 5-star, ring the alarm. My full nature is still greater, I'm twice born. But never the ball, that's the fucking level I'm on.
Talk to these people, man.
Picture me lost, I'm differently raw. Been through the muck, most y'all instantly barf. Now I'm strictly the boss, drippy, hood hippie couture. Feeding these bitches till it's ripping they jaws. For y'all fans of the bullshit, me flicking it off. I damage your whole clique, these clowns really pissing me off. My verse is heat, and scripted is law. Like, bitch, you fucking know who you singing across, huh?
Okay, you got their attention now,
I
bro.
keep winning.
You just gotta keep showing them what it is,
I
man.
keep winning.
Your shit different for real, though.
I
man.
keep winning.
Yo, stay away from the politics,
I
though,
keep
my
winning.
dude. They still not getting the message, kid.
I keep winning.
They still don't understand where you coming from.
I keep winning.
But make sure you secure the fucking bag,
I keep
man.
winning.
I see the growth,
Yo,
keep going.
I'm through playing it low key. Don't sleep. My power levels are OP. I'm floating, the mask
It
off.
is what it is.
Crew run deep, bigger than Sasquatch. We that large, the last gladiator. Blast off. It's either love or give me respect, that's all. Killing these niggas like, yeah, this what you asked for. Black Panther spit flames from Asgard. The whole squadron click transform. Fuck around, find out. Here's a crash course. We all time past now and fast forward. And we keep winning.